Hey class, welcome back. I hope you guys are all doing well today. Today we're going to be looking at Rise of the Nazis Part 2, and in this PowerPoint that we're going to be going through, we're going to be looking at a couple of other things in regards to Nazi society, some rallies that they held, and some other things. But then we're going to transition to some of the bold moves that Hitler does to really test the European powers. And to be honest, the European powers, they're scared of having another World War I, so they kind of back off on all of these moves until finally the very last one with the invasion of Poland. Okay, class, we're going to have our PowerPoint lecture on the Rise of the Nazis Part 2. All right, so the first topic I want to talk to you about today is the Nazi Party rallies. And these rallies were just huge events that they would do one time a year, and they would all gather together in Nuremberg, Germany, which is in Bavaria, and then basically celebrate Nazism. And it was a big military show, a lot of soldiers, the Hitler Youth would be there, a lot of loyal Nazi party members, and those are just regular people that are Nazis that would be Nazi members, party members. And they would all gather together in Nuremberg for a gigantic rally. So we'll just go through this quick. Held in Nuremberg, Germany, which is in Bavaria. It was held in 1923 and 27 and 29. And then annually from 1933 to 38. It was a huge propaganda event. Basically, it was the place to be if you were a Nazi. That you had to be there. It was the celebration of Nazism. It was displayed Nazi power, nationalism, and enthusiasm to the entire world. So again, don't just think that they were in their own little bubble there. I mean, you would have reporters there from all over the world reporting this. Just some characteristics of the rallies: several days long, sometimes up to a week long. Grand scale. There would be hundreds of thousands of Nazis there. They would have big human swastika formations, torches, bonfires, just a good party atmosphere, I guess you could say, for Nazism. Masses of military formations. They would have Wagner music and martial marching songs, enormous and numerous banners and flags. Hitler would go and give a speech, long speech. Other Nazi leaders, they would give long speeches. Many times they would proclaim a new Nazi initiative. An example of that is in 1935. The 1935 rally introduced new racial laws, which were very important. So this is a couple of pictures here from the rallies. I mean, there's masses of people in this parade ground. And in this picture, it's kind of hard to tell here, but in this picture, this is Hitler right in the center of this. And I'm not sure who these are. Could be Göring and maybe Himmler. I'm not sure. And they're saluting this Nazi flag. But just masses of people, gigantic banners back here with a swastika on it. Some stormtroopers here. And then over here is another picture. And so you see this colonnade, huge building with masses of people. And then over here, this is the stage. And what's interesting about this is at night, and so they have these big spotlights shoot straight up in the air, making like these pillars of light straight up in the air. And each one of these are big columns, and this is the stage here. Just huge banners, and inside of each one of these columns is a banner with a swastika on it. Just a really big show. So as I had mentioned, at the 1935 rally, they introduced the Nuremberg laws of 1935, and these were basically race laws, and they were in two sections. The first one was a law that was called the Law for the Protection of German Blood and German Honor, and that forbade marriages and extramarital intercourse between Jews and Germans. And then the second part of the law was the Reich citizenship law, which declared that only those of German or related blood were eligible to be Reich citizens. And so basically what happened was it basically made the Jew not a citizen. And if they're not a citizen, they lose all rights as a citizen. And so the way they did that was Jews could not marry a German. So right there, if a Jew couldn't marry a German, then they were no longer a citizen. Right there, they're no longer a citizen. And then the same thing here with the blood law. Okay, so here's a kind of a picture. It's in German, but over here, this would be the German-blooded person. So you have. And this is who you look at. This circle right here that I'm circling with the plus sign inside of it. You look at that, and then you look at their parents. Okay. Now let's say that this is the father. Then you have to look at the father's parents, and then the grandparents' parents. And the circle with nothing in it, with no black in it, I'll say that, with no black in it, means it's pure-blooded. So if this is you, that means you're pure-blooded. Okay? So then we come over here, and we start looking at where they have some black in it. So this is the pure blood. Well, now this is the mixed blood. And that means that this is you. Let's say for example it's you. Okay? Well, you have an eighth of blood that's Jewish. Your parent has a quarter blood. The grandparent is half blood because one great-grandparent was a full-blooded Jew. So if a great-grandparent, full-blooded Jew, married this, let's say this is the grandfather, married the great-grandmother, who's not a Jew, they would have a half-Jew, half-non-Jew child, who is the grandfather. The grandfather would then marry a non-Jew. They would have a quarter Jew, son, which is your father. And then you, let's say your quarter Jew father married a non-Jew mother, then you, being born, would have an eighth Jew in you, eighth Jewish blood in you. And then they would have a breakdown of this, if you were a German citizen or not. And where it really got bad was over here, because now you're just like, this is basically mixed second grade, mixed first grade, and then Jew, and then Jew. And notice, I mean, it didn't take very long for you to all of a sudden you can no longer be a citizen. So over here, these people here where it says Jew and Jew, is Judah and Judah, they wouldn't even be citizens, even if there was a Gentile or a non-Jew in their blood. Okay, so, and it would be all broken down with who could have what, and these were the race laws. Okay, so we're going to continue on just with some more things going on in Nazi Germany. The Summer Olympics of 1936. Germany won the bid in 1931 to host the Olympics. Hitler built a 100,000-seat track and field stadium, as well as 6 gymnasiums and other smaller arenas. And this was a big deal for Hitler. I mean, this was, he was already the Fuhrer for almost 3 years now, and he was Chancellor in 1933, and then the Fuhrer in 1934, and just the rise of the Nazis and the coming together of the nation and the bettering of the economy, all of that. Well, now they go and win the Summer Olympics, and so now all of the nations are coming to Germany to play in the Olympics. So it was a really big deal for Hitler. The games were the first to be televised and radio broadcasted. It went around to 41 countries. Hitler saw the games as an opportunity to promote his government and ideals of racial supremacy. And he did a really good job at it. They had a whole Nazi Olympic division that would run the Olympics, and they did a really good job at promoting Nazism. There were swastikas everywhere, flags everywhere. It was clean. It was modern. It's just a really a really neat place to be for the Olympics. And he used this to his advantage. The problem is when you go to promote your racial supremacy, your athletes in your Nazi Germany athletes had better win against non-Aryan athletes. And even though the Nazis won the most medals in the Olympics, 1936 Summer Olympics, there was one event that they just could not beat this person, and that was Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens was an American, and he was a runner, and this is him right here getting the gold medal, and he won a lot of gold medals, but you can see that he's African American, and so clearly he would not be even in Nazi idea. He would not even be on the same plane as an Aryan, but he was just an excellent runner. He won the a good number of gold medals for the USA in the 1936 Summer Olympics, and you can see here's a Nazi giving the salute on the stand, but he didn't. I'm not sure what place he's in, but we do know that Jesse Owens is the one that won the gold. So even though they pushed their racial supremacy, Jesse Owens was the hero for the United States. But you can see just this huge arena. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people there. Flags, the flags were everywhere. There's Olympic and Nazi flags everywhere. So just a really important time for Hitler to be able to promote Nazi Germany. Okay, so for the rest of this PowerPoint, we're basically going to work up to the beginning of World War II. I just titled it Hitler's Bold Moves. And he did a couple of these in the mid to late 1930s that the rest of the world, especially the rest of Europe, didn't really know how to handle it, and so they didn't do anything. And then Hitler became more emboldened and until World War II starts. So the first event we're going to talk about is Germany remilitarizes the Rhineland, March 7th, 1936. After World War I, the Treaty of Versailles demilitarized the Rhineland, which is the border area with France. And if you remember back then with the Treaty of Versailles, the German military was downsized, and the area of Rhineland, which is near the Rhine River, it's the Rhine River Valley, which borders France, there could be no military in that area. Well, March 7, 1936, Hitler sends his military, because he'd been building up the military in preparation for World War II, but he's building up the military, and he sends them in. So in 1933, Germany began working towards rearmament and remilitarization of the Rhineland. March 7, 1936, the German army occupied the Rhineland. There were joyous celebrations across Germany. Now remember, the Rhineland belonged to Germany. It's just that the Treaty of Versailles said they couldn't have their military in there. Well, the military goes in, and the Germans there are all happy. The French and British governments are unwilling to risk war because what they're thinking in their mind this whole time is that they're going to end up having another World War I, where millions of people die, stuck in the trenches for 4 years, in the mud, all this death, loss of money, all that. So they're not willing to risk the war over the Rhineland. So they decide against enforcing the treaty. And so I put in small print there, this was the attitude of the French and the British during the Rhineland remilitarization, the Anschluss, the Sudetenland crisis. Those three things that we're going to talk about. That was their attitude. They were not going to enforce the treaty. And it just emboldened Hitler more and more. And it was not until the invasion of Poland that they finally declared war. So it begins Hitler's boldness in Europe with the remilitarization of the Rhineland. And here's a map of it. So here's Germany, and this yellow part is part of Germany. Okay, it's just yellow because that's the Rhineland, and there was no military in there since the end of World War I. And then in 1936, Hitler sends his military in. Now, this is German land. It's not, okay, this isn't part of France. It's not part of Belgium. This is Germany. It's just that he's sending his military into there. And France and Great Britain, they do nothing. Here's the German army crossing the Rhine River. And again, there's people, there are flags, salutes, people lining, kind of celebrating that. Again, it's Germans going into German soil. It's not like some other country, but they're celebrating. The second bold move is the Anschluss, March 12th, 1938. And this is the annexation of Austria into the Third Reich. Now, we're just going to go real quick through this. I'm really oversimplifying it. But in a nutshell, there was strong support from Germans and the Austrians to unite. The Austrians, they were close to Germany already. They're a separate country. But there were a lot of Nazi sympathizers in Austria, and then what happened was they began forming their own Nazi groups in Austria. They may have been ethnic Germans or even Austrians, but they collected into their own Nazi groups, and so Hitler is basically saying, I have supporters in Austria, so they should be part of Germany. And so Austrian Nazi groups began to cause violence in most cities in Austria. So they started kind of causing turmoil. And Hitler used that as basically saying that he needs to bring these Nazis into the German fold and unify the country with Germany. Austrian Chancellor Kurt Schuschnigg capitulated, and the German army enters Austria to cheering crowds and Nazi salutes. He basically takes the country of Austria, makes it part of the Third Reich without firing a shot. And what did France and England do? Absolutely nothing. Okay, so here's a picture of them moving through one of the streets in Austria. I mean, you can see the people are just cheering and flattening Nazi flags and saluting. So now we actually have German soldiers moving into another country, but it's under the umbrella of the annexation. So they would be basically just saying that they're moving into German territory now because they annexed Austria to be part of the Third Reich. So here's a picture of that. So now we have, this is obviously the Rhine land, which we just talked about. That's all militarized. This is all of Germany. And they have just taken Austria as part of the Third Reich. Now up here where it says East Prussia, that's part of Germany. But remember, after World War I, the creation of Poland, they wanted to give Poland a seaport called Danzig. And so this is called the Danzig Corridor. And that's going to be in Hitler's sights coming up. He doesn't like that this part of Germany is separate from this part of Germany because of the creation of Poland. The third move of Hitler's bold moves is called the Sudetenland, or the Sudetenland Crisis, September 30th, 1938. And the Sudetenland is borderlands of Czechoslovakia and Germany. As Hitler's power grew, the Czech government started building forts in 1936. Okay, so I'm just going to go back one slide. So here's Czechoslovakia, and here's Germany. Well, as Hitler became more powerful, in 1936, Czechoslovakia started building forts along this border. Okay, along that border, they're starting to build forts. They start to see Hitler as a threat. Since the Anschluss was successful, Hitler claimed he wanted to defend ethnic Germans who lived in the Sudetenland. So, this land here is the Sudetenland. It's the border area with Germany. And now Czechoslovakia is building forts in there, and Germany doesn't like that. Now, the reason that there's ethnic Germans in here is because, again, after World War I, they sat down and started drawing lines on the map and saying, okay, this belongs to Czechoslovakia, this belongs to Austria, this is now a new country called Hungary, this is a new country called Poland. Well, when you start drawing lines on a map, you start enclosing people that may be ethnically German, but are now part of this country. And Hitler doesn't like that. He says, I want these guys, these ethnic Germans, to be in the fold of Germany. So what happens is the German Nazis who are in the Sudetenland, the same idea, the Nazi groups who are loyal Germans, ethnic Germans, they join the Nazi party and have Nazi groups in Czechoslovakia, in the Sudetenland. They demand autonomy. They say, you need to let us be free, basically to join Germany. Hitler declares that he would go to war with Czechoslovakia if the Sudetenland Germans were not free to come into the Reich. So what happens is we have the Munich Agreement, September 30th, 1938. Germany, France, Great Britain, and Italy meet and agree to give the Sudetenland to Germany in exchange for Hitler's promise to not invade or take any other lands. That is the agreement. And they sign the paper, all of that. Hitler signs it. Neville Chamberlain signs it. Neville Chamberlain was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. That Hitler will promise not to do anything more aggressive. In exchange, he can have the Sudetenland. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain of the United Kingdom, or Great Britain, he gives a speech. It's called the Peace in Our Time speech. He gives a speech declaring that there's peace now in our time. That's where it got its name from. Because he gets off a plane. Actually, I'm going to put a video link, a short video link of that, where he gets off the plane. He's like waving the paper around saying, we have peace in our time, or something like that. So, and obviously there's not peace in our time because a year later, World War II starts. But anyway, October 1938, the German army invades the Sudetenland without firing a shot. And so, let's just look right here on this map. You have Germany, and this part of East Prussia, which is part of Germany. You have the Rhineland, which was occupied with the military, and that was Germany already, but they put their military in there, so now you have the military. Then the Anschluss, they annexed Austria, and now this pink section here is the Sudetenland. Okay, so he gets that. I didn't cover it in this, but then there's going to be some negotiations where this part of Czechoslovakia, this central part here, gets enveloped into Germany, okay, which is called Bohemia and Moravia. This section, with some negotiations and some minor kind of treaties and all of that, this here gets enveloped into Germany also. Okay, so just a map, but we just have here Hitler's promise to not invade or take any other lands. Well, Hitler wants this. And the way he's going to get this is he's going to invade Poland. And that's going to start the Second World War. All right, so this is Chamberlain. This guy on the far left, that's Neville Chamberlain. And obviously this is Hitler. You can see his uniform. He's got his wound badge from World War I, his Iron Cross from World War I, first class, and his Nazi member pin. He would always wear this. Okay, the next one, bold move, is called Kristallnacht, November 9th, 1938. Now, Kristallnacht means, basically it's called the Night of the Broken Glass. It means glass night, literally, but it's Night of the Broken Glass. And this is basically a move against the Jews. It's a violent breakout against the Jews. It got its name from all the shattered Jewish storefront windows. The Jewish stores, they smashed all their glass windows in the front of the stores. And so that's how it got its name, Night of the Broken Glass. It was an unplanned reaction after a German official was killed by a Jewish teenager in Paris. Okay, so when this German official was killed by this teenager in Paris, this event happened. However, once started, it quickly became organized, and Nazis rose up in many cities, destroying businesses, synagogues, and killing Jews. So 7,000 businesses, 250 synagogues, and 90 Jews were killed. The next morning, 30,000 Jews were arrested for crimes, and most of them were never seen again. They were sent off to concentration camps. So this is called Kristallnacht, persecution against the Jews. The people that did this were mostly they were young. The Hitler Youth were involved in smashing these things. Some SA units were smashing things. There's a picture of a storefront with a broken window. The last thing that we're going to talk about here is the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact, August 23rd, 1939. World War II is going to start just a week later. Okay, it's also called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Hitler had his sights on Poland to reunite ethnic Germans separated by the Danzig corridor. German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop flew to Moscow and met with Joseph Stalin. They make a treaty that both countries would commit to non-aggression towards each other for 100 years. Joseph Stalin said no, that 10 years is long enough. So they make this treaty that they're going to not be aggressive towards one another for 10 years. It also said that each country would not aid a third-party country in case of war. And I remember World War I. That's how World War I started. All of these treaties were signed that if one country went to war, the ally would be drawn in, and then another ally would be drawn in. And so basically it was like these third parties would be drawn into the war. So they make this treaty that they would not be aggressive towards one another, and if a war takes place, a third-party treaty can't be involved. They would not aid some third-party country. And this was part of the deal. If Germany invades Poland from the west, Russia will invade from the east. Poland would be divided where they met in the middle. Russia would also get Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. So this is very tempting for Stalin because he's going to be able to get some land. If Germany goes and invades Poland, then Russia will invade from the other side, and basically they're going to divide Poland in half. Stalin viewed this as a way to protect against German aggression. So basically he's saying that if we go to war, if Germany goes to war against Poland and invades, Russia will invade, they'll come together in the middle, and they have this 10-year deal that we'll be okay, we'll be friends. So Hitler used it as a way for him to get Poland. Now, the very last bullet point, I put a note there. The pact fell apart when Hitler invaded Russia in June 1941. Okay, so this 100-year, 10-year, that didn't even matter because 2 years later, Hitler's going to invade Russia. So here again, here's Greater Germany. So they already had, this is Austria down here with Vienna, Austria. Here's Germany up here. Here's East Prussia. That's separated from Germany from the Danzig corridor. Here's the Sudetenland. And then, like I said, this little section here, through some treaties and negotiations, they became part of the Greater Reich. It's called the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. When World War II starts, Hitler's going to invade this way, and then Stalin is going to invade this way, because this is Poland. All this is Poland. And they're going to come together at the German-Soviet demarcation line. They're going to come together here. It's actually a river. They're going to come together there, and that's where they're going to stop. And Hitler's going to get this part of Poland, and Stalin's going to get this part of Poland, and these new countries up here, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. There's Stalin and Ribbentrop shaking hands. And that's going to be it for this PowerPoint, Rise of the Nazis Part 2. See you in a second. Okay, class, that's going to be it for today. We've got a really good basis now on the Nazi state, Adolf Hitler, the rise of the Nazis, all of that. We've got a good foundation with what's taking us now into the Second World War, which we will be looking at the beginning of the Second World War next time. Okay, take care.